Steelers Nation is breaking news. What just happened with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers isn't just another offseason move. It's a clear signal about direction, control, and how far this organization is willing to go to stabilize the most important position on the field. The team has officially placed a right of first refusal tender on Rodgers, and that single decision changes the entire dynamic of this situation moving forward. Here's what matters to you as a fan. Rodgers now has something concrete in front of him. For weeks, there had been this lingering narrative that there wasn't a real offer on the table, that he was still evaluating, still waiting, still deciding whether he even wanted to play football in 2026. That part is gone. The Steelers have put forward a structured path, and if Rodgers signs it, he's looking at roughly a 10% raise from his previous salary, putting him in the range of about $15 million for the season. But the money isn't the headline here. It never really was. Everything about this situation points to timing and control rather than finances. The Steelers are essentially saying, take your time, make your decision, but we are not going to sit here exposed while you weigh your options. This tender protects them, and it does more than that. It quietly locks the situation down, because now, if another team tries to step in late and make a move, Pittsburgh has the right to match any offer Rodgers accepts. That alone makes it incredibly difficult for another franchise to realistically pull him away. Add to that the compensation factor tied to the compensatory pick formula, and suddenly the cost of acquiring Rodgers becomes even less attractive for outsiders. Then there's the most important layer. Timing. If this situation drags into training camp, Rodgers loses the ability to sign elsewhere entirely. At that point, it becomes Pittsburgh or nothing for the 2026 season. So when you step back and look at the full picture, this isn't just a procedural move, it's strategic pressure without confrontation. And from everything surrounding the situation, it doesn't feel like Rodgers is blindsided by this. The timing aligns perfectly with the NFL calendar. The deadline to apply this type of tender just passed following the draft, which means the Steelers waited as long as they possibly could before making this move. That suggests communication. It suggests both sides understood this was coming if no decision had been made. Now shift the focus to what this means on the field, because that's where this really hits home. Inside that locker room, there is clear support for Rodgers. Veteran leaders want him back. Defensive anchors, core players, even key offensive additions have been pushing for his return. That matters more than anything you'll see on social media. When a locker room believes a quarterback gives them the best chance to win, organizations listen. And right now, the belief is simple. Rodgers is still the best short-term answer, not just because of his experience, but because of the situation around him. The Steelers have made roster improvements. There's a belief that with a stronger supporting cast and familiarity within the offensive structure, Rodgers can perform at a higher level than what we saw previously. But there's another layer here that can't be ignored: development. The presence of Rodgers doesn't just impact wins and losses this season, it shapes the future of the quarterback room. A young player like Drew Aller isn't being rushed into a role he's not ready for. Instead, he gets time. Time to learn, time to develop fundamentals, time to understand what it takes to operate at an NFL level without the pressure of immediate results. That's a luxury not every team has, and it's one the Steelers clearly value. Because let's be honest, throwing a developing quarterback into live action too early can derail progress. The organization knows that. They invested in Aller, and protecting that investment means building the right environment around him. Rodgers provides that bridge. And that brings us back to the central question of this entire situation. What does Rodgers actually want? Because from the outside looking in, this feels less like a negotiation and more like a personal timeline. The Steelers are ready. The locker room is ready. The structure is now in place. The only thing missing is Rodgers making the call. There's an expectation that a decision could come before OTAs, possibly in that window just before they begin. If not, it could stretch a bit longer, maybe into early June. But the sense around this situation is that it won't drag all the way into training camp. Still, this is Aaron Rodgers we're talking about. Nothing is ever completely predictable, and that's what makes this moment so fascinating for Steelers fans. The team has done everything it can to set the stage, to protect itself, and to position the roster for both immediate competitiveness and long-term stability. Now it comes down to one decision. So the real question is this: if you're sitting where the Steelers are right now, with everything lined up the way it is, do you believe committing to Rodgers for 2026 is the right move? Or would you rather see the team take the risk and turn the page immediately? Because that's really where the conversation gets more intense, and honestly, more divided among this fan base. If you follow the logic of what the Steelers just did, everything points toward a franchise that is not interested in taking a step back in 2026. This isn't a team preparing for a rebuild. This is a team trying to stay competitive right now while quietly setting up its future. And bringing Aaron Rodgers back fits that plan almost perfectly, even if it's not the popular choice for everyone. Think about the timing again. OTAs are approaching. The offseason program is moving into the phase where on-field work actually begins. And yet, Rodgers is still not in the building. That would normally raise concern, but internally there doesn't seem to be panic. And that tells you a lot. It tells you the organization understands his process and, more importantly, is willing to accommodate it. There's also a football reason behind that patience. At this stage in his career, Rodgers isn't a quarterback who needs every early offseason rep. The early portion of the program is heavy on installation, meetings, conditioning, things he has already mastered over a long career, especially within a system that has familiar elements to what he's run before. The real value comes later, when actual reps begin, when timing with receivers sharpens, when the offense starts to take real shape on the field. And that's why the expectation around the building is that if he signs, it likely happens before or around the start of those meaningful sessions. Not necessarily at the first possible moment, but not so late that it disrupts preparation for the season. But let's address the other side of this, because it's real and it's valid. There is a portion of the fan base that looks at this situation and sees hesitation as a red flag. They see a quarterback who is taking his time, who isn't fully committed yet, and they question whether that's the kind of leadership you want heading into a season where expectations are still high. That concern doesn't come out of nowhere. Leadership at quarterback isn't just about what happens on Sundays. It's about presence, accountability, setting the tone early. And when that presence isn't there from day one, it creates doubt, even if the reasoning behind it makes sense from a physical or strategic standpoint. But inside the locker room, the tone appears very different. The players aren't questioning his commitment. They're advocating for his return. They believe in what he brings, not just in terms of production, but in terms of command, experience, and the ability to elevate the offense in key moments. That belief carries weight. More weight than outside noise. And then there's the reality of the alternatives. If the Steelers were to walk away from Rodgers at this point, what exactly is the plan? You're looking at unproven options, developmental players, or quarterbacks who haven't shown they can consistently win at this level. That's a gamble, and not the kind of gamble a team with playoff expectations usually wants to take. So when you put it all together, the decision to place the tender wasn't just about protecting against other teams. It was about reinforcing their own direction. It was about saying, this is still our path forward, and we're going to make sure it stays viable. And now everything circles back to the same focal point, timing and intent. If Rodgers signs soon, everything lines up cleanly. He integrates into the offseason at the right moment, builds chemistry, prepares for the season, and the Steelers move forward with a clear identity. If he delays even within a reasonable window, the pressure builds. Not necessarily inside the building, but externally among fans and media who will continue to question the situation. And if for any reason he chooses not to play at all, then this entire strategy shifts instantly. The Steelers would be forced into a completely different approach, one that likely accelerates the timeline for younger quarterbacks whether they're ready or not. That's why this moment feels bigger than just a contract decision. It's about stability versus uncertainty. It's about whether the plan the Steelers have carefully built actually reaches the field, because right now everything is in place, except the final answer. So as you look at this situation heading into the next few weeks, with OTAs approaching and the clock quietly ticking, ask yourself this: if Rodgers does commit and returns as the starter, do you believe this team truly has what it takes to make a real run, or are they just delaying the inevitable need to find their long-term answer at quarterback? And the truth is, that question doesn't go away even if Rodgers signs. It actually becomes louder, because the moment he puts pen to paper, the conversation shifts from will he return to what does this actually lead to? And that's where expectations start to tighten around this team in a very real way. If Rodgers is back, this is no longer a transitional year. There's no more hiding behind development or long-term planning. The standard becomes immediate: compete, win, and make a legitimate push, not just for a playoff spot, but for something deeper. That's the pressure that comes with this kind of move, and internally, the Steelers seem ready to accept that. You don't structure a situation like this, you don't maintain patience throughout the offseason, and you don't get buy-in from your locker room unless you believe the payoff is worth it. Everything about their actions says they believe this roster, with Rodgers leading it, can take a step forward right now. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because even if everything goes right, even if Rodgers plays well, even if the offense improves, even if the team competes at a high level, the long-term question still sits there waiting. It doesn't disappear, it just gets delayed. And maybe that's the plan. Maybe the Steelers aren't trying to solve everything at once. Maybe this is about layering decisions. Stabilize the present, give your young quarterbacks time, build continuity in the system, and then make a more informed decision when the moment is right. That's a very different approach from forcing a solution, and it requires patience from everyone. The front office, the coaching staff, the players, and especially the fans. Because it's not the flashy route. It's not the instant answer. It's a controlled process, but that only works if the bridge holds. If Rodgers delivers stability, leadership, and enough production to justify the approach, then everything lines up. The team stays competitive, the locker room stays engaged, and the younger players develop in the background without being rushed into the spotlight. If that doesn't happen, then the criticism you're already seeing starts to multiply fast, because then it becomes a question of opportunity cost. What did you pass up by committing to this path? What development was delayed? What risks were taken that didn't pay off? That's why this decision feels so layered. It's not just about one season. It's about how one season impacts the next 3. And right now, all of it is sitting on a timeline that's getting shorter by the day. The Steelers have made their move. They've drawn the line. They've created a structure where realistically this ends with Rodgers in Pittsburgh if he chooses to play. There's very little ambiguity left from the team's side. So now, every bit of attention shifts back to Rodgers himself, not just whether he signs, but when he signs. Because timing will shape perception. If it happens soon, it reinforces confidence. If it stretches even slightly, the noise grows. And in a market like this, with a fan base this engaged, that noise always finds its way into the conversation. But once that decision drops, everything accelerates. Preparation begins, expectations lock in, and the focus turns entirely to what this team looks like on the field when it actually matters. So as this situation moves toward its conclusion, and as the window for a decision continues to narrow, the biggest thing to watch isn't just the outcome. It's what that outcome signals about where this franchise truly believes it is right now. Because bringing Rodgers back doesn't just answer a question at quarterback, and once that direction is defined, there's no walking it back. Because the moment Rodgers is officially in, every decision around him starts to carry more weight. Play calling, roster usage, game management, even how quickly younger players are brought along, and it all becomes tied to maximizing a very specific window. A window that by definition is short. That's the trade-off the Steelers are embracing here. You're not building around a 5-year plan at quarterback. You're building around immediacy, around experience, around the idea that a veteran presence can elevate everything quickly enough to justify the approach. And that brings us to something fans don't always talk about enough: identity. What kind of team are the Steelers trying to be in 2020?